Good afternoon. Today is September 7th, 2023. I am Ebony Love and I'm located in Jacksonville, Florida, and we are recording via Zoom with audio only. I am joined by Aramis Ayala. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did.
Okay, and can you just start by telling me where you're physically located?
I am physically located in Orange County, Florida, where I have practiced law for, last 20 years.
And so, are you from Florida?
I am not. I was born and raised in Saginaw, Michigan, which is north of Detroit. Went to the University of Michigan for undergrad, where I got a BA in political science. Matriculated to the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law, where I graduated and received my Juris Doctor. I relocated to Florida, took the bar here, and I have practiced since. Midway through my practice as an assistant public defender, I was so interested in criminal law. I went back to the University of Central Florida, where I got my master's in criminal justice.
What motivated you to leave Michigan and come down to Florida?
There's so much. I mean, the weather is unbeatable, I mean, despite the hurricanes, but Central Florida is always a safe place. I had always been interested in living in the state of Florida, and Florida doesn't have reciprocity. So when you are graduating from law school, you've got to make a decision if you want to be somewhere that doesn't allow reciprocity, where you would have to take the bar, no matter how long you had practiced. That was some of the incentive as well.
And so for people who are watching this who have no idea what the bar exam is, so basically you have to get an undergraduate degree in any, follow your passion, whatever your undergraduate degree is, do that. And then you go to law school for 3 years, but you can't practice until you pass the bar exam. And so there are some states, like I am from Georgia, and so I'm barred in Georgia, but I work in federal courts, so it's okay to not be barred in the state that you physically live in. But you have to take that bar exam, and so it's really important to look at those. Where do you want to live, and kind of figure out what exam you want to take.
Correct.
Were you a first generation college or law student?
Yes and no. So my parents were not college educated, and ironically, while my sister and I were in college, my parents went back to school. So my dad did graduate, and I mean, he's elevated outrageously now, but we were the first ones straight out of high school. So yes.
How did you navigate that process?
It was a family effort. My parents were fully committed to education. My dad was a Vietnam War vet, worked 20 some years, 30 at the time, at General Motors. So he wanted more for his children. And when large universities started being an option because of our scholastic success, our academic success, we just continued to get the support. It was like, where are your dreams, and what's next? And they found the way to make sure that we were able to fulfill them.
Okay, and so when you were in law school, did you know you already knew that you wanted to come to Florida, but did you know that you wanted to work in criminal law?
Always wanted to. I actually knew criminal law before Florida. I remember being in the fifth grade. I am still in touch with my fifth grade teacher. And I remember telling her very specifically, I wanted to be a prosecutor.
And why is that?
It was something about the concept of justice. The naivete that we often, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We often are relatively naive over time. We lose that and can often become pessimistic and lose our definition or concept of justice. And I never did. So I believed in the concept of justice. I wanted fairness, and I don't like to take credit for it, like I did something great. I think it's just the way God made me. It's the way that I was created. It was placed in my heart. And as a young child, I didn't fight for it, but I always stood for it. All of my perspectives, when we would have dinner as a family, conversation would always be what is fair, what is equal. So it was a perspective that I always believed in. And when I found out you could actually have a job fighting for that, and that be you wake up every day being able to fight for justice, I knew that's the job I wanted.
And so you told your fifth grade teacher this. Did she kind of help you develop your plan for getting into law school, or did you have any other mentors who kind of helped you playing
Well, I
out
mean,
this stuff?
so fifth grade, it's a dream,
Mhm.
it's just you kind of talking. But she certainly encouraged, like if I would wear law school sweatshirt, she would highlight that. If I would ever doubt myself, you can't think like that if you're going to go to law school. So little things that helped shape me with more hope and belief in myself rather than self doubt. I'd say yes. A lot at home being there. I did not have people who I looked up to who I knew were attorneys. The first Black woman I ever saw, my eyes lit up. I was part of a high school law explorer program, and she was one of our coaches. And I didn't get that close to her. I didn't know her that well, but just being an image of success, knowing that she was very humble, very open, super helpful, and outrageously successful. I then related with that and was inspired by it.
And she was a prosecutor, or she was just a lawyer?
She was a prosecutor.
Okay. So one thing that I'm learning is that, you have this definition of justice that you just provided, but you also have had people who encouraged you along the way. Have what are your thoughts about encouraging the next generation of attorneys? And do you have any insight about how we can possibly do that?
Absolutely. I think that it is important to remind people as we come up and get it at the foundation that we define our path. We define justice. When you've had this monotonous image, this all white male dominance within the legal field, they define justice without the diversity. So in the field that I've been in, prosecution, for example, justice was defined by the harsher sentence, right? More people we can lock up. When you bring something different to the table and you have a different outlook and perspective, you aim to redefine justice in a way that impacts the most people. So I have always found it important to empower young aspiring lawyers, even aspiring law students, that you have free reign to define justice and pursue that justice using the law and within the boundaries that are set under the law. But your creativity, your passion, and again, how you define justice is the path that you can create. You create your own path in this field. That's why they call it the practice of law. It is important to identify mentors and people who you look up to. But the reality is, there's something inside of you that is pushing you, that is creating and growing that desire. And you're just putting the label lawyer on it because it gives you so many opportunities to pursue that. So find your way, navigate, identify individuals who will help support it, be inspired, but most importantly, be an inspiration to those that are following.
And I heard you say earlier that you were with the defender's office. So did you start with the public defender and then transition into the prosecutor's office?
I did not. My very first job out of law school was exactly what I wanted it to be, what I dreamed of. I was a prosecutor
Okay.
in a smaller county here in Polk County. And that was where I learned how to prosecute the small mechanics of prosecution. And I learned a lot about myself. It was my first job, and I wanted justice where I started to lose a little bit of that optimism when I saw a system just, it was almost like, forgive me for the pause, um, triage. And the concept of inhumanity began to grow. I was like, this is not at all what I imagined, but I was a young lawyer, very inexperienced, and didn't have enough knowledge under my belt to really know how to navigate that system. See, sometimes in certain cultures, we are raised to believe that if you have a strong argument, you're going to be good, when that's not the truth. What makes you good as being a lawyer is understanding the law and how to navigate those good arguments through that through that lane. That's what we have to do. So I knew that I needed to learn a little bit more. And really what happened is I never denied who I was. I'm a woman, I'm Black, and I'm never going to deny that. And I realized that I was part of a system that was incarcerating more than it was saving. And I had an officer lie on the stand. I couldn't prove it, but I knew it. And I was like, absolutely not. I am not meant to do this. I don't know why I dreamed this. And then I left and I became a public defender. One of the most fulfilling jobs ever, because in that position, it's one of the only ones in our system where people have to be approved. You have to talk to them. You have to hear their story, to meet their moms and hear about their kids. And, you know, the one-on-one dynamic allows you to really delve into the realities of our system where it's no longer triage. Now, granted, yes, there are aspects of public defense that can appear to be that way, but if you have any desire to really understand people, you are going to take that. And you know, I was doing public service. I was there for 10 years, went into management, trained people, and I loved what I did. Tried every type of case, started at suspended license, went up to homicides. And of course, I got the itch. You know, student loans are coming due. I want to drive the nice car. I want to do all the travel. So I thought that I was going to go pursue civil litigation. I was going to go into civil and make me some money. That's what I thought. And the offer that I'd received was about $21,000 more than what I was making at the time, and that was significant in early 2000s. So I left. And the funny thing is, when I got that job, I was actually bringing home less money despite making 20,000 more, because there were the insurance, the retirement, all of the things. So the number looked good. And then I was stressed. I mean, I wasn't partner, so I'm sneaking in the back. If I take a 35-minute lunch versus 30, I got to, you know, you want to be there before the partner. So it was absolute misery. And within 5 months, I was no longer working there. But again, I had to be honest with myself. And in addition to being honest with myself, I did have the support. You know, my husband was like, yeah, this is not healthy by any means. So I had the ability to do that. And I don't take it lightly that there are some people who may not. So I went back to criminal practice, but this time I knew a lot. Remember when I told you that as a young prosecutor, wasn't that experienced. And I went back with a different frame of mind. I knew I wanted to prosecute sex crimes. I knew I wanted to be an equalizer in our system where it was chalked with systemic racism, to be a voice. And I left and I went back to the prosecutor's office. And I loved it. I was very happy. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, I want to make sure I'm not being outrageously narrative.
Oh, you're fine.
So I loved it. I was there for 2 years. And when I wanted to see some change, I made some suggestions that fell on deaf ears. And I remember telling myself years ago, if your name's not on that office, you don't have any rights. You are working for their vision. And I accepted that. And then I started getting asked questions about putting my name on the office and the inquiries. And then ultimately I did. I resigned to run for state attorney. And in 2016, I was elected and became Florida's first Black state attorney. And I've been super proud of the legacy we were able to make, the work that we were able to do. And again, defining justice in a way that acknowledges the casualties of our criminal justice system, but doesn't just acknowledge them on those who are committing crimes in our system. It also acknowledges them on those who are having crimes committed upon them. Because often when we talk about reform and criminal justice, we leave out victims who look like us. And it is important to recognize victimization is very similar to those who are affected as it relates to their identity.
What I was going to ask is, you had said that you wanted to be an equalizer when you were in the prosecutor's office, but instead of answering that question, Can you kind of reflect on what you think your legacy has been? It's been about 7 years since that election. What would you define your legacy as?
I say this over and over, but increasing accountability, redefining justice, raising standards of accountability where we admit our wrong. It's easy to say in a relationship, you got to be accountable, admit what you did wrong, or there's no reconciliation. We leave out that word. And if we're going to be in a relationship with our communities, we have to recognize the wrongs that we have committed upon them. So using that platform as state attorney to say, you know what, prosecuting based upon illegal stops is an injustice, right? Like over incarceration is an injustice. Allowing us to turn a blind eye to the issues and the illegality, if you will, and incompetence or lack of ethics from law enforcement to prosecutors to anywhere in the system is an injustice. Being able to speak truth at all times and recognizing that there's a difference between speaking truth to power and speaking truth as power. Right? As a state attorney, I was the power and I had the ability to continue to perpetuate the lies and the misinformation, or I could speak truth as power and give people solace that what I thought was happening really was happening. And now it's time to make the change.
When it came time for you to run, what was that process like? And do you have any words of wisdom for somebody who might want to run for office, for state attorney specifically, in the future?
So it was extremely difficult. And I would tell anyone running for any office, before you're able to learn your community, you're going to learn yourself. Understanding what that really means almost requires you to put yourself in there. I've said that to people and they're like, oh, yeah, I can see that. And then when they run, oh, I see totally what you meant. So it was very challenging. Everyone in your house is running for office. Because everyone has to endure the sudden meetings that you have to go to. So they're adjusting to dinner and, pickups if it's a spouse, or you not coming home, leaving the sitter there a little extra later. It's very intrusive, and your life is no longer private. So there's a lot that goes into that. It's extremely challenging because the public, you feel like you cannot fail because it will be a public failure if you do. So you're grinding and grinding. And then if you're not successful, you always remembering that it's not you who failed. It was either your campaign or the fact that the people didn't come out to vote. But being able to distinguish between what you're doing and who you are is really, really, really important, no matter how it works out. Because even if you're successful in your campaign, you cannot be identified by the position that you serve. You are still you, and making that separation is hugely important. And setting up the goals as a fiduciary and not necessarily an individual person does make a difference.
And to kind of start wrapping up, you were the first Black elected state attorney in the state of Florida, like ever, which is in and of itself a major accomplishment. It's amazing to be able to say that, because I think what we lose is that we usually say, oh, Thurgood Marshall was the first Black justice on the Supreme Court and he's no longer with us. We think of the first being so long ago and it has no impact on what we're doing today. But most importantly, you were not the last. And so there have been two other elected state attorneys since you, Monique Worrell and Harold Pryor, who is a Gator. And yes, I'm claiming it, even though he didn't go to our law school. What do you hope is the legacy of Black state attorneys in the state of Florida moving forward?
Oh, that's a very loaded question. And the reason it's loaded is because we have to understand our common ground is our common struggle. But even in the midst of that common struggle, there's a lot of diversity within Black people. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should celebrate that. We should encourage that and not put people in a, hole where they have to live because of their Blackness. The caveat to that is whatever that diversity and distinction is, it cannot undo and deny the struggle, if that makes sense. There's a lot of times you have Black people who think different, and if they think different, oh, they're not like us. That's not true. If your thinking different undermines the white privilege I'm up against, if it undermines the struggle that I still have in front of me, if it denies your Blackness so that you can ascend to places where you think that you are accepted, but you are really not, that's where we have to be able to deal with the distinction. So we don't just all alone just say, oh, well, they're different, so they lose some Blackness. No, it is whether or not the mind and the mentality with which they're functioning negates the truth that we are all faced against. And that is white supremacy. That is the oppression. That is the denial of democracy, our voting rights, our education rights, the mass incarceration, all the things that go along with that. We have to be mindful that if we are being different, we are taking different avenues to the same goal, not denying that that is still our goal.
Is there anything I did not ask you about that you would like to share?
Yeah. I think it's also, you mentioned other state attorneys, and I just gave that long answer. I think it's important to recognize continuity is important. I did support Monique Worrell in her campaign. And it was a struggle because I had earlier supported my chief assistant before she chose to get in the race. But supporting her was the best decision that I made for my legacy because we communicated and still do. We created a real, genuine relationship that allows us to double up the efforts for the change and the reforms that we're seeking. And there is no competition. We recognize that breaking the ceiling is extremely difficult. It is also difficult trying to now do the change because they celebrate me, right? And then after they celebrate me, they're like, okay, well, it's your turn to do something, not realizing that she's been in office less than 4 years. And this legacy that we're up against is like decades and centuries in place. So it's change doesn't happen overnight because we didn't get here overnight. So I just wanted to be able to comment upon the need for continuity, for unity, for acceptance of differences, but always having a common goal that recognizes our common past.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought I was muted. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot, and I think it's really important to get your voice too, because I was thinking about it. You are the second prosecutor that I've interviewed for this series. And I say second only because the first prosecutor that I had interviewed was only there because it was the Great Recession and it was an easy, accessible job with the government. And so I think this is a perspective that I personally haven't heard yet. And so I'm really appreciative for you sharing your time.
Well, thank you.